Hey everybody, welcome to Three Things I've Learned with me, Susan Dolci, where we share the stories that shift our souls. So, this is going to be an interesting podcast for me today because and it could also get very emotional, but I'm very, very excited to talk about this. And it's ironic, probably isn't the right word, but I booked my guest several months ago. And it's because I saw her book. I was fascinated with her book and the work that she does. And I was like, I have to have her on my show. This is a topic I've wanted to talk about for a long time. But little did I know that the day or the week before she was going to be on my show, that this topic became front and center in my life. So I'm going to do my best to get through this. I might get choked up. That's okay. We're going to power through it. So today I'm talking with Cindy Kaufman, a certified end of life doula. She holds a master's in education as well as being an education specialist, and she brings her background in counselor education as well as being, she has more than 25 years of hospice volunteer work. She's also a home funeral guide, a death educator, and author that we're going to talk about today of the international best-selling book, The Mortal's Guide to Dying Well, Practical Wisdom from an End of Life Doula. Cindy is also the owner of HeartSpeak End of Life Companioning, LLC, and she is a co-founder and president of the Colorado End of Life Collaborative. She serves as a compassionate companion on life's final journey for the dying person and their loved ones. And before we get into the questions, I want to say that Cindy's made a very generous offer. She's giving away an autographed copy of her book to the first caller. And again, the name of that book is The Mortal's Guide to Dying Well. And that number is 1-800-930-2819. Thank you, Cindy, for your patience. I got through all that. And it's so good to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's so good to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me today. And I think this will be a great conversation with us today.
Yeah, so some context to my opening. Last Tuesday, I got a call. I was actually I was finishing up a pre-record and my phone was buzzing off the hook, and I listened to the voicemails as soon as I got off, and it was the nurse at the skilled nursing facility where my mom lives recommending that my mom be qualified for hospice. My mom's 87, she'll be 88 in a few weeks, and she has pulmonary fibrosis, so she's on oxygen. But I was like, hospice? For me, hospice has always been one of those things. Like when my dad went into hospice, he had about 3 weeks to live. And so I had this whole concept of, that this was a imminent, time that you call people in when death is only a few weeks or days away. And so she explained to me that's not how it is now. So that was Tuesday. Wednesday, I had no power in my house. Power was cut off for a good reason, but I had planned to read your book that day,
Mhm.
and it was it was the most comforting book, and the time that it all happened. I was like, I just felt like God had his hand in all of it. And so I really want to get into the whole hospice topic because I've got a lot of questions. But
Yes,
you have such an amazing story about how you got into this work. It's so beautiful. Can you share that story first?
sure. Well, and thank you for sharing your story about your mother. And I hope that our conversation today can help enlighten you on some of the maybe misconceptions or things about hospice care and her situation. So I look forward to talking to you about that. Um, so my trajectory with end of life work started at the age of 29 when I had an opportunity to sit with my grandmother during the last few days of her life. And we knew she was going to die. She actually was in a hospital intensive care unit, and she was actually alert. She had had some heart procedures that didn't work, and she was still on a heart pump, and the doctors brought her out of anesthesia and told her that she would not be leaving the hospital, that as soon as they turned the heart pump off, her heart was going to fail and that she would die. So they said, we can leave it on for a day or two and allow you to say goodbye to people, but this is not something long term that we can do. So let's prepare for your death. And it was my first experience with death. At the age of 29, no one close to me had ever died yet in my life. So I was completely unprepared. But immediately, I realized I didn't want to leave her side. I wanted to be there for her last few days, and I wanted to be there when she took her last breath. And I don't know why, I just couldn't leave her. But we did have an opportunity to have some conversations, and that was time that was incredibly valuable to me, and time that no one else got. It was just, my ability to ask her for some wisdom and, things that she could impart to me about life and end of life. And then, when it got to the point where they had to place her in a medically induced coma so that she would not die painfully when they turned off the machine, um, I realized that some of my other family members were uncomfortable being there and said, how can you sit here and watch her die? And my thought was the complete opposite. How can you not sit here and watch her die? Like, I didn't want to leave her side. I felt like she needed a companion. I didn't want her to be alone. I didn't want her to be just with medical staff. I wanted,
Mhm.
her to have someone who loved her there with her. And part of it was I wanted that experience. I just didn't know what it was like, and I wasn't afraid of it. And coming out of that experience, I realized that I had the ability to do something that I saw not everybody else could do, and that was to be comfortable with death, comfortable with imminent death. And
Yeah.
even of someone that I dearly loved and was already grieving the loss of. But coming out of that, I realized, I had that realization that she had given me a gift. She
Mhm.
showed me something within myself that I had, whether it's a skill or an ability, I don't know, um, but I realized that I was comfortable with it. And so it took me about a year, and then I sought out hospice volunteering as a way to continue to offer my services and my ability to sit with people at the end of life. And so at the age of 30, I began doing that, and I've been doing it ever since in one way or another. And then a few years ago, I faced my own mortality and became very ill. And coming out of that situation, I realized I didn't want to do anything in my life that wasn't something I was passionate about. And so I sought out how I could take all these years of hospice experience and turn them into something I would be passionate in doing. And I discovered the work of end of life doulas. And when I heard about it, I realized this is what I've been doing all these years, but it gives me more tools in my toolbox, more skill, more ability to do more in depth work with people. So I took the training as quickly as I could, and I realized this is my path going forward. And it's everything led me to this. And and now it's just this beautiful work that I'm so happy to share with others and offer people in my community and help other doulas in their business and things like that. So that's where I am today.
And I really think, and you talk about this a lot in the book, and I mean, part of the reason I wanted you on the show to begin with is because I'm a huge proponent of we need to talk about these things while we're alive.
Yes.
We need to talk about them when we're young. We need to talk about them with our families. We need like this whole idea that death is, a taboo topic. I love the quote in your book where you say, uh, uh, death is like no, it's like talking about sex. You're not going to get pregnant from talking about sex, and you're not going to die if we're going to talk about death.
Right.
So I know I misquoted you, but
No,
that's the
it's
gist of it. And it's true. Like I have so many friends. Like I'll bring this stuff up and I'll start to have conversations about it. And my one dear friend, she's like, "But you need to stop. Like this is you're depressing everybody." And it's that whole denial. Um, that I just don't understand. I
And it
don't
keeps us
understand.
afraid. It keeps that
Keeps us
denial
afraid.
keeps us afraid. We're so afraid of not only being with death, the death of someone else, but our own, right?
Right?
Um, and we hide it. We hide death in our culture, and we keep it from our children. We don't allow children to see it or talk about it or experience it. When really there's no reason that a child shouldn't sit in a conversation about grandpa's funeral, right? There's no reason to hide that from a child. Children can deal with a whole lot more than we give them credit for dealing with, and they know what's going on anyway. They really do.
Yes. Yeah.
And us not addressing it directly with them, it creates more anxiety in them because they don't have that open conversation. So
And I
yes, it is a difficult thing, the taboo part
and
of
I
it.
think, like with regarding children too, we're going to take a break here in a little bit, but I want to make this point is children are still very able to see through that veil.
Hmm.
And I think often they are more connected with the spirit of that loved one that's passing, and they know what's happening, even though
Yes.
all the adults, I mean, I had an experience like that when my grandmother died. I was like, why are all pretending that I don't need to know what's going on? Or, they all rushed to the hospital and they left me with a family friend, and because I couldn't be there.
Hmm.
I was like, this obviously I knew what was going on. My grandmother was communicating with me what was going on. And I don't think we give our kids enough credit
We
in
don't.
that.
Good
So
point.
this is a good time to take a quick break. We've got so much more to talk about. I'm talking with Cindy Kaufman, End of Life Doula. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, we're back on. This is Three Things I've Learned with me, Susan Dolci, and my guest today is Cindy Kaufman. She's a certified end of life doula, and she's been a hospice volunteer for 25 plus years. So she's got a lot of experience. And today she's giving away her book, an autographed copy of her book, which is called The Mortal's Guide to Dying Well. And the first person to call in will get that. And the number's 1-800-930-2819. And Cindy, where can people find you online?
So my business website is HeartSpeak. That's all one word, my business HeartSpeak. And the number two and the letter u.com. HeartSpeak2u.com is my website. I am also at the Colorado End of Life Collaborative, which is COEOL collaborative.org. So I can be reached at either of those websites, and my contact information is available on both of those.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
that's a heavy conversation. Well, at least is for me. A lot of people, I feel like all my shows lately have been taboo. I've been talking about politics and religion, and now I'm talking about death. But anyway, so I know, I guess I'm just rebellious. But my mom was just qualified for hospice, as I was saying, just so actually technically yesterday. And I had no idea, like I said, that, that it's about like if it's about 6 months, if it looks like they've got about 6 months to live, then they bring in hospice. And uh, because when they first said it, I literally my body started shaking, and I was like, "What are you not telling me? Like,
Mm,
what terminal illness does my mom have? I'm so confused." And granted, I haven't been able to see her since March 7th. I've been able to look at her through glass and through a fence and stuff, but I haven't able to like physically like
mm,
be in her presence. So I thought, oh my gosh, something horrible had happened. And they calmed me down and they said, no, that's not how hospice works nowadays. And they try to get people enlisted into hospice, qualified for hospice earlier, because so many of the services, um, the benefits are so helpful that they told me my mom might actually graduate off of hospice, especially
sure.
because she's going to be getting more social interaction. She's going to be with a nurse twice a week, aide twice a week.
Hmm.
And, in these times, like I said, she's been isolated since March because she has pulmonary fibrosis. She's a high risk, for COVID.
Hmm.
And
Sure.
so they've kept her, she's such a social woman. She's been eating alone, that they closed the dining halls. And there was a part of me that thought, how much of this could be depression, and loneliness. And she's told me, she's been a real trooper. She's like, yeah, I'm lonely, but, I've got the TV, and it just breaks my heart. But I also know she's safe
Mhm.
as far as the the virus is. So, I could totally see my mom graduating off hospice, and maybe that's me just being optimistic. But I would love for you to share what the difference is between hospice and end of life doula,
Mhm.
how they complement each other, when you call in one and not the other, and how all that works.
Sure. Um, and I totally agree with what you're saying, considering that she's been so isolated. Just the isolation alone can affect the, process of her illness as well. Because, emotions and physical health, it's all tied in together.
Mhm,
And the spiritual self, all of that is tied in together. So it is foreseeable that if you increase her interactions with others, particularly people who are caring for her, that she could see an improvement in her status. So we'll definitely pray for that for her.
thank you.
But yes, so the thing with hospice is that most people come to hospice too late to take full advantage of all the benefits that hospice provides. And so I definitely encourage people to seek hospice sooner than later, and to know that it doesn't mean death is imminent. It doesn't mean that uh, that um, I think about some people think that hospice is a place to go and die,
Mhm,
and because there's so much unknown about it, and that's not the case at all. It is services being provided to people who do meet the criteria of a doctor has to certify them with 6 months or less to live, but they can get recertified when they exceed that, right?
mhm,
So it's I've seen people be on hospice to continually get recertified because they continue to meet it, but the time keeps going. So keeping that in mind, that this could be services for her for quite some time, and considering that we're still in this pandemic, could be very beneficial to her.
mhm,
I know a lot of hospices are not allowing hospice volunteers to work with patients right now, that it's only, um, people with proper PPE and things like that, which they don't do for volunteers. But if you have the opportunity to have a volunteer for your mother, that would also be really helpful. And maybe it's a volunteer that calls her on the phone and she just has a relationship with
mm,
this person who she can talk to. And so that's possible too. I would suggest you look into that. So, end of life doulas, and because I've been doing hospice work for so long, I can now easily see the difference between what hospice provides and what end of life doulas provide. And hospice does a wonderful job of medical management, symptom management, pain management, all of those things that are really important to keep people comfortable at the end of life with whatever illness they're dealing with. Um, Doulas, end of life doulas, are non-medical um, help. And so there is a gap between what hospice provides and what the caregivers can also do. And I'm thinking in terms of, if you have someone who's dying in their home or in someone else's home,
mhm,
and you have hospice who comes into the home and provides their services, which is, you have a nurse who visits typically once a week, and they're the ones that take care of the symptom and pain management. You have a nursing assistant, a CNA, whatever that's called, where you live, and that's the person who comes in for personal care, help with bathing and things like that. And then you have a social worker who meets with the caregivers and the dying person to talk about any social services that might be necessary. And then you have a chaplain, typically to provide spiritual care. And then often a hospice volunteer. So you have that extra person who also comes in and can help with respite care so that the caregiver can get a break, or sometimes just companionship for the dying person, that type of thing.
I have a quick question about the social work aspect, because they did
Mhm.
ask me that. They said, "Do you want a social worker? Do you need a social worker?" Chaplain. I said, "My mom. If somebody comes in to pray with my mom right now, she's gonna be am I dying? So I said, I said, no, let's hold off on the chaplain. But what exactly, like, what are the social services that they would provide as a social
Well,
worker?
my guess would be since she's in a facility that she's probably getting most things met that she would need now. But that person can also provide some not in depth counseling services to her. Can be a person that if she does need to have a conversation about something emotional. So the social worker can also be that type of relationship with her as well. And this is the gap that so this is a good segue into the gap that exists. So hospice staff all have caseloads, and most of them have quite large caseloads, and so they get 1 hour or 30-minute window, whatever that is, in their time frame to meet with that patient, and then they're off. They've got to go to their next appointment. End of life doulas have they don't have caseloads.
Okay.
We all work independently for ourselves. Hospice, as of yet, has not brought in end of life doulas as another care provider. I don't know if that'll come eventually, or if end of life doulas will still remain independent and something that gets referred to having that. But we have more time to spend with the dying person and their caregivers, their family, their loved ones, to provide more respite care, to provide um, death planning. So we do that too. We help people provide or plan for the final days and hours of their life. We call that vigil planning.
Mhm.
And when you have someone who has the feeling that they've lost all choice and control, that death is coming and they don't have any decisions about when that's going to come and how that's going to come, it really takes away a lot of um, ability to choose for yourself how you want things to be. So one of the things I really love is vigil planning because it says to that person, where do you want to be when you die? What room in the house do you want to be in? Or if you're in a facility, what do you want around you? Is there, grandmother's special quilt that you would like on the bed with you? Is there a particular scent or sound or music? Or do you want someone particular there in your final hours? Is there someone that you don't want there? Right? Or if you're in a home, do you want your pet in the bed with you? So it's very specific. We get very specific. How do you want the lighting to be?
Mhm.
How do you want visitors to approach you and who can visit? And, do you want them quiet or are you used to having like a really loud and boisterous family home and you want people to behave as if they always have? Joke and laugh and be loud because that's what my home sounds like and feels like. So
Right.
so we get down to those really finite details and we write a plan. And as an end of life doula, I'm an advocate for that plan. So I make sure that as close as possible, when those final hours of life come, we're following that person's plan. We get the lighting and we get the scent and we get the music and we do all those things that that person wanted when they could still speak for themselves.
Mhm.
Because usually when we're in the last hours, they can't speak for themselves anymore, but they've already made that plan ahead of time.
Who What's your experience of, like, who seeks you out? Is it the family members that seek you out and they sort of propose you to the dying relative, the loved one, or because I could see me, like, with my when my dad passed, I would be like, you because my dad was so afraid and so in
Mhm.
denial and just so much fear about death. Period. I remember one time asking him, like, I said, uh, we were talking about end of life stuff and he didn't want to talk about it. And I said, do you just think one day you're not going to wake up? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, that's not how it works. It's like, that's not how it works most of the time. But like, so I could have reached out to somebody like you and said, I think my dad could really use your services. And my dad would have been, get her away from me, or I don't want to have anything to do with this. And so, how does that
So I've
work?
had I've had experiences like that where it was a family member who heard about me, heard about my services. We had a talk on the phone And he said, "I don't know if my dad's open to you or what you do. I'm not even sure we really understand what you do because we haven't really heard that much about end of life doulas, and we don't want anybody coming in here and doing woo woo stuff. My dad would not be in favor of anything like that." I said, "It's not what I do." you know.
Mhm.
So I just said, if you would just be open to scheduling a conversation, I'm fine if dad says don't come back. I can handle that, but let's just see. And it took one conversation. And I'm not saying this is true for everybody. There probably would be people who say, don't come back because they just can't open themselves to it. Um, but your question is who usually seeks out the services? Sometimes it's the dying person who wants that extra help, wants that, because one of the beautiful pieces about the doulas is the companionship piece that we hold that space for that dying person. And it becomes typically a very trusted and intimate relationship because we become very close with that person and we become very close with the caregivers who are in the home or in the care facility. And the conversations that take place are absolutely amazing because it gives that space for that person to feel able to say things to somebody that they can't say to anybody else. And I
Mhm.
say that in the sense of sometimes families can't hear what the dying person wants to say. And sometimes the dying person can't hear what the families want to say. There's this communication breakdown. So if there is in any way we as doulas can help mend that, and it's not always possible, but if they want it and we can help mend that, we try to do that. If not, then we have just become companionship for those people to be able to express what it is they're thinking and feeling, and their desires and wants and things for the days that are coming, because it's a very chaotic, hard time for everybody,
Well,
for
and
sure.
I really like what you're saying about the I shouldn't say like what you're saying about miscommunication because that's never a good thing.
Yeah.
But what one of the things that I value, I have a friend who's a Jewish hospice chaplain,
Hmm.
is you kind of it's almost like when they're starting to transition, they kind of have one foot in the real world and one foot on the other side, that
Yes.
and uh, they they're saying things that we don't understand. We're like, what are
Yes.
you talking about? Or what do you they're looking for something they can't find, or and you guys, if you, people, you really are gifted. The people who can do this, I just bow down. I'm like so impressed with your gifts. Because you can help the families communicate with the dying person about what they're trying to say and what they're looking
Absolutely.
for, trying to accomplish or mend or forgive or
Yes, so we are also that skilled person in the room who can help normalize what we're seeing and hearing, right?
Mhm,
And to say, it's like eating, right? So the body, when it's getting close to death, has no need for food or drink anymore and will stop wanting it. And actually, it can be hazardous if you try to feed or give liquid to someone whose body is shutting down. But families want to do that. It's a natural kind of thing to say, "Mom hasn't had anything to drink in 3 days. Let's try to
right.
get her a sip of water." But mom could choke on that, right? Like so to have this skilled person in the room, and again, hospice does all of these things, but they're not always in the room. And to be able to have a doula who has the time and ability to spend there, particularly what we call the vigil time in the active dying phase, in the last maybe day or two, and certainly the final hours when death is imminent, to have someone there who is, again, a trusted resource because you've built that relationship with this person and they're very skilled in what we're seeing and what is happening, and to be that calm um, presence, that person who can hold that space, um, no matter what's going on. And families aren't always functional. There's a lot of dysfunction in families, and you may have people who understand and accept what is happening with mom in her imminent death, And you may have one family member who is not accepting, who is in denial, and it creates this very difficult dynamic that's going on in the room. So again, you have this objective person who is not a family member, but who understands the dynamic of what is happening. It's just such a valuable gap to
Mhm.
fill, that isn't being filled and hasn't been filled by anyone else who serves in that end of life space. Um, and so that's really how doulas come in and fill that much very much needed space at the end of life.
This is a good place to transition to the next topic that we'll cover after a quick break. You're listening to Three Things I've Learned. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, we're back with Cindy Kaufman, End of Life Doula, and author of The Mortal's Guide to Dying Well. People can find you at HeartSpeak, all one word, the number two, and the letter U, right? Heartspeak2you.com.
Hmm.
Um, and you're also on Facebook, right?
Yes, I'm on Facebook at HeartSpeak End of Life Companioning LLC.
So before we took that break, we were talking about, everybody sort of like the taboo of death and all that. So my dear friend, Leon, her father-in-law just passed, and he lived in upstate New York. And he had some complications with hospice. I'm not gonna throw hospice under the bus, but so I'm not sure what was done as far as palliative care and that for him. But
Hmm.
his wish was after he died to be put on dry ice for 3 days.
Hmm.
So in his home. So he had
Hmm.
a home funeral,
Yes.
which is another thing that you are an expert at. And they basically had a wake
Hmm.
in the home for 3 days. And so her husband said it was really like very relaxed. It was,
Hmm.
if somebody wanted to go in and pay their last respects, they could. If they didn't want to, they didn't have to. And I was like, "I- I've never heard of this before." And apparently, I mean, obviously it was a thing, right?
Hmm.
Back in back in
Pre-Civil
olden
War.
days. Yeah.
Pre-Civil War. Hmm.
And now it's coming back because people are seeking out green funerals, like not, no embalming, not being buried. And so can you talk a little bit about that? About how
Yeah.
first of all, in the book, she's got a whole chapter on how the funeral industry came to be. It's mind blowing to me. I just never even thought about it.
Yeah, it is most people don't know. Well, and if you weren't here pre-Civil War, or you don't have this family history that anybody ever shared what it used to be like, then we don't know. But the funeral industry took over after the Civil War. We didn't have a funeral industry before that. Burials and home funerals were done by the families, by the community. If you lived in a small town, community members would help out. Um, and one of the things that I loved when I was doing research on this is to realize how the living room got its name. So the living room was actually pre known as the living room. It was really the parlor,
Mhm.
right? This is how the parlor came to be in the funeral home, right? In the parlor.
I did know
So,
that.
so
Fun
the
fact, trivia. I did know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the parlor was where the home funeral took place. So the families would prepare the bodies, or sometimes there was a person in the community, a woman typically in the community, or a group of women who might help out a family and come and help prepare and clean the body and prepare for the home funeral. And then they would have like a side door because it was like uh, believed to be, bad to take the dead person out of the front door where people came in and out. So they would have a side door to bring the body in and out. And then during the Civil War, people wanted their loved ones brought home from the battlefield, but some of them had to travel very long distances to get those bodies back. So they started embalming them in the field. That's when embalming began. And then after the Civil War, they started turning over death care to the local undertakers and the funeral homes. And then embalming became very commonplace. It was believed that you had to embalm or the body was um, brought illness and sickness and things like that, which is not true. And but that was the belief, and that's what people were told. And
Was
so
it belief, or do you think it was funeral director propaganda?
I think there might have been some early belief about that, and particularly if the person had a disease that,
Yeah. Yeah.
then you could understand how that might be true. But just to say that the body itself is unhealthy to handle is not true,
Mhm.
unless there is a disease process, a communicable disease process, something like that. So, um, but the funeral industry just, it started that people were being told this is how we do it, right? This is what you have to do, and then laws were made around that to say that people, can't you have to be a funeral director to handle a body, and in some states that's still true. You can't transport a body unless you have certain rights and whatever, and in some states that's not true, that the family members could actually rent a van and take the body from the hospital where their loved one died to their home to home funeral them. So laws are different in different states and different places, but um so home funerals now are making a return because people are more conscious now about environmentally friendly ways to have final disposition.
Mhm.
And embalming a body and putting it in a concrete bunker in a plot of land um, is the least environmentally friendly way to handle a dead body. And so many people turned to cremation. They thought that was healthier, and now we're realizing that a lot of us have like mercury in our teeth, and yeah, I do. And
Old person with old cavities. Yeah.
so when you get cremated, that mercury goes up right into the air, and along with all the other, a large percent of the bodies as they're cremated go up into the air, and so everybody in your town is breathing those things, and it's not as environmentally friendly as we once thought it was. And so people are now looking at green burial, which is a natural burial ground where the body is not embalmed, and it's wrapped in environmentally friendly cloth, and so everything degrades as nature would have it. Um, so green burials are making a return, as are now a new thing is, and it's not available in all states, but it's gaining interest, is aqua cremation or
Mhm.
alkaline hydrolysis, which is they also call chemical cremation.
Mhm.
So it's breaking the body down in a water bath of chemicals, and then what remains is biologically nutritious liquid that people are putting back onto the earth and in gardens and in farms, and then you also do get can be returned to the family. They can have some of that liquid if they want to pour it on their own land, or they can also have the bone that is left does not break down, and that becomes bone ash, and they can have that and use that similarly to cremation to dispose of ashes, or save them if they wish to do that. So that's a relatively new growing field in
I
body
read about it,
disposition now.
uh, an extensive like went down the rabbit hole reading about what cremation. It wasn't called that but that was the process. And do you know why they started it?
The
Or
aqua
I shouldn't say,
cremation,
do you know how it got started?
I don't think it started here in the US.
It didn't. It
Yeah.
started in the UK, and it was to
Oh, I do
manage.
know. I do know.
Well,
Go ahead.
it was cows with mad cow disease, right? And they
Yes.
were trying to find ways to dispose of them where it wasn't, like a safe way to dispose of these
To
cows
not
that.
bury those cows
Right,
or even burn the cows, yeah.
right. And so I was fascinated. I was like, so it's not exactly when you read the details of how it happens. I guess none of this is actually pleasant to think about, but it is definitely it's leaves very little left of the human body, which is basically what's primarily happening if
Mhm.
you have a green burial in the ground. I mean, we're just decomposing, and that's it's just a different way of making the body break down in a
In
container
nature's way, in
in
nature's
nature's
way.
way. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
So I think that the important part about this conversation really is choice,
yeah.
that we have choice. And if you don't have these conversations with your loved ones, guess what? No one's going to know what to do with you when you die if you haven't told somebody or documented what you want for yourself.
So I just got a note from my producer, Olivia, that we have a caller,
Okay, wonderful.
and I know her. So she's going to be nice to us.
Yeah, we've got Leone from Maine. Leone, you're on with Susan
Oh,
Dolci.
Hi, Leone from Maine. Welcome to Three Things I've Learned with Susan Dolci.
Hello, Susan
Hi, my
and
friend.
Cindy.
hi, Leon.
I thank you for sharing my story of Richard's passing. I also wanted to ask Cindy: is there a directory of doulas that I can look up for in Maine or in New England?
Sure. So there are a number of training programs around the country. If you Google End of Life Doula training, you'll find some of the top training programs around the country. But one other great organization, and most of those have directories for people they've trained. So that's one place to look, would be the different organizations that train. But another great resource is the National End of Life Doula Alliance, which is nedalliance.com. I think it's .com. I don't think it's .org. I think it's .com.
Okay.
And they have doula members not just all over the country, but all over the world. So they have a great directory for people who've joined the National End of Life Doula Alliance, and you could look for someone there.
Perfect. Thank you. I think people will be seeking this out for sure. I will for my parents. So thank you.
And I would just also mention, if anyone is interested in finding a home funeral guide, the National Home Funeral Alliance, similar to the National End of Life Doula Alliance, the National Home Funeral Alliance also has a directory on their website of home funeral guides that you could look for someone in your area if you want help with that.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Leone. One of the other things that you talk about in the back of the book, well, I guess it's at the end of a few chapters, is conversation starters about how do we bring up these conversations when you have friends who don't, unlike Leone, who just called, who obviously likes to talk about this stuff, but when your family members don't want to talk about it, there are some really interesting ways to bring this topic up.
Mm-hmm. And they're not all mine. Like I didn't create all of these ways to do it. Like the death over dinner is one way to do a conversation. There are card games that you can get to help do that. And I do list those in the book. But I think one of the best ways to start the conversation is to tell your loved ones. And I don't always say family members, because I think family is often defined by who you want your family to be, not always blood family. So whoever your loved ones are, the people closest to you, that you start the conversation by saying, I want you to know what I want for myself. I need to tell somebody so somebody knows. And in the back of my book, I do have some worksheets where you can write down your wishes for final disposition and end of life and things like that. To add these worksheets or something similar to that to your advance directives. A lot of people now are very familiar with advance directives, living wills, to say that you don't want life support if death is imminent, you don't want to be kept on life support, things like that. So if you have those documents, which I hope every adult has those documents, from 18 and up, because guess what? We don't ever really know when that day is coming. So
Talk about not wanting to talk about it, huh?
Talk about not wanting to talk about it. There's no reason for anybody 18 and over to not already have their wishes set forth and written down on paper, put where somebody knows it, provide a copy to somebody, put it with your advance directives, put it with your will. If you are a family, a married couple with children, and you have a will, you know, saying how you want your property to be distributed and your children to be taken care of, things like that, have your advance directives, and even say what you want for your vigil planning and what you want for your final disposition. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want a green burial? And then go ahead and take that step to find out what's available in your area. So us talking about aqua cremation today, if that perked you up and you're like, that sounds like something I'd be interested in, look and see what's happening in your state. I don't know what all the state laws are. It's coming. I think it'll come eventually everywhere. It's still pretty new, but a number of states have it. Colorado has it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with me today, for God putting you here with me today. Because this is, I feel held. I feel taken care of. I feel provided for. I feel that my mom's in good hands. And I'm at peace with all the things that are happening. So thank you again. Cindy's website is HeartSpeak. That's one word, number 2, the letter U, heartspeaktoyou.com. And please, it should be required reading. Go get her book on Amazon. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Thanks for listening to 3 Things I've Learned. If you'd like to learn more about my coaching techniques or the Diamond Process, you can visit my website at susandolci.com, where you can sign up for a free 30-minute clarity call. We all have a story to tell. We can live in the story, or we can transform the story. It's your choice. Change your story, change our world. #Storyfield. Thanks for listening, everybody.